The moment I realized my internet was crawling slower than a tranquilized snail, I thought I was hallucinating. My entire house was wired with fiber-optic gigabit speed, top-tier, private node, business class plan. And yet, Netflix was buffering like it was 2006 and I was on dial-up again. I rebooted the router, ran diagnostics, even swapped the Ethernet cable just to be sure. But nothing worked. My smart home hub refused to connect. My security cameras lagged. My fridge wouldn't tell me the weather. In the middle of the mess, I got a ping from my ISP's usage monitor. A data spike. A massive one. My system showed another IP piggybacking on my line, right through the buried cable that ran under the neighborhood greenbelt. And that was the moment I knew. Karen had done it. She lived 2 doors down, on the corner lot with 5 flamingo statues and a porch swing that hadn't moved since her divorce. Karen, queen of the HOA and self-appointed enforcer of everything from mailbox aesthetics to acceptable bird feeder height. She had complained to me about her internet before, of course. Multiple times, in fact. Her nephew, Reed, freeloading boyfriend with a vaping habit and too many snapbacks, couldn't stream his Twitch games, and her Facebook Marketplace browsing was lagging unbearably. I'd nodded sympathetically, given her the number of my ISP, then gone back to living my life in bandwidth bliss. Apparently, that wasn't good enough. So there I stood, in my utility closet, staring at a red warning light that screamed, bandwidth breach. The usage logs confirmed it. Another MAC address had been granted access through a physical split. A manual splice. Someone had physically tapped into the fiber running beneath the shared HOA easement. I didn't want to believe it, but who else in the neighborhood was petty, desperate, and entitled enough to actually dig through municipal dirt to steal data? I mean, cable theft was one thing. Fiber? That took nerve. And shovels. And probably a YouTube tutorial. I didn't confront her. Not right away. That's not my style. Besides, what was the fun in that? No, this was going to be a long game. A calm game. A buffering game. I reconfigured my network from the backend. Set up packet throttling. Flagged her MAC address. Rerouted her connection through a sandbox server with a 3-second latency delay. Just enough to ruin every Zoom call, glitch every TikTok, and break the soul of any online gamer. Then I masked the change under a benign firmware update, so her system would never know. It was elegant. Passive-aggressive vengeance, served ice-cold. That same afternoon, I watched from my porch as Karen screamed at her router on the other side of the cul-de-sac. She waved it around like a voodoo doll, yelling into her phone, probably to some hapless Spectrum agent. Her boyfriend stomped around the lawn in socks, smacking his phone like it owed him money. I sipped my iced coffee. Sweet, sweet upload speed never tasted so good. But she wasn't just angry. She was suspicious. And when Karen gets suspicious, she doesn't investigate, she accuses. By morning, I found a passive-aggressive letter taped to my mailbox with her signature floral stationery and a sticky note that read, "Please stop interfering with HOA shared utilities. We know what you're doing." What I was doing? Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea. Instead of responding, I escalated. I set up a series of fake SIDs in my house. FBI surveillance van, virus_injector_9000, Karen_stole_misspeed. I made sure each broadcast was just subtle enough to gaslight her. Every router in my attic was aimed at her property like a directional Wi-Fi cannon. I watched her wander around her front lawn with her phone held up like a divining rod, trying to sniff out signals like she was hunting for buried treasure. She had no clue how deep I could go. A week later, she tried to retaliate the only way she knew how, by bringing in the HOA. During a meeting in the clubhouse, she proposed a new clause to the bylaws that would allow the HOA to audit all utility connections passing through communal land. The irony was thicker than molasses. I raised my hand with a polite smile and asked if that meant we'd also be auditing sprinkler systems. Karen hesitated. I added that her new rose beds, seemed suspiciously close to the HOA's shared waterline. Her face flushed like a microwaved beet. The motion died on the table. But I wasn't done. Not even close. See, when she tapped into my line, she didn't just steal bandwidth, she committed a federal offense. And I had it all documented. The packet logs, the physical splice, the MAC address fingerprint. All I needed was the final nail, video evidence. So I installed a motion-triggered wildlife cam by the greenbelt where the fiber line entered the ground. Camouflaged in a fake birdhouse. Within 3 days I had my shot. Her boyfriend, shirtless, vaping, and using a gardening trowel to fiddle with a junction box like he was defusing a bomb made of spaghetti. Karen stood over him, holding a clipboard. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I went to the ISP. They were thrilled. Turns out, fiber line theft isn't just illegal, it's expensive. Damaging a single strand can cost thousands in repairs and legal fees. The ISP's legal department practically high-fived me through the phone. They wanted to press charges. I said not yet. I wanted one more thing. A public reckoning. So I waited. Let her connection continue to degrade. Let the buffering wheel spin like a roulette of misery. And just when she was at her breaking point, posting angry rants on Nextdoor, accusing neighborhood hackers of running a hostile cyber-terrorism ring, I made my move. I invited the HOA board, the ISP rep, and the city code inspector to my house. Called it a community tech demonstration. Karen showed up uninvited, of course, foaming at the mouth about internet sabotage and claiming she had reason to believe I was illegally rerouting data. I calmly handed the ISP rep my wildlife cam footage. He watched it once. His face lit up like Christmas. Karen saw the screen and lunged for it, screaming something about data entrapment. The ISP guy didn't even flinch. He turned to the inspector and said, "We'll need to dig up the junction box." Official audit. Karen went pale. And right there, in front of the HOA board and her nosy garden club friends, the inspector uncovered a bootlegged fiber split wrapped in electrical tape and stuffed into a plastic Tupperware container. It was amateur hour. The kind of setup that looked like it had been made by someone who once Googled how to hack a Fire Stick and thought they were a tech god. Karen tried to claim it was an old installation left by the previous owner. The ISP rep pulled up a time-stamped footage from last Tuesday. The HOA president asked her to step aside so they could talk privately. Karen refused. She was escorted from my lawn by the city inspector. I stood there, watching her walk off in a fury, dragging her vape goblin boyfriend behind her like a deflated parade balloon. My internet? Still blazing. Hers? Gone. Permanently. ISP pulled the main node connection to her house pending legal action. I heard she tried to use mobile hotspots for a while, but the buffering never stopped. TikToks refused to load. Amazon Prime stalled out on buffering hell. Karma, in glorious 144p. Karen didn't just take the L quietly. That's not in her DNA. Within 48 hours of the Greenbelt fiber bust, she launched a full-on smear campaign with the same rabid intensity she once reserved for fining people for unauthorized Halloween decorations. It started with a flyer. Actual paper flyers, mind you, copied at Office Depot and stuffed into every HOA resident's mailbox like it was 1997. The top read, "Warning, cyberbully in our midst." Below that was a blurry screenshot of me standing near my utility box, printed in grayscale like a haunted Bigfoot sighting. The body of the text accused me of running an unauthorized data surveillance scheme and hacking HOA neighbors using predatory Wi-Fi traps. My favorite part? She called me the cul-de-sac hacker. I found mine crumpled under the mailbox flag. I didn't even get mad. I laughed so hard I nearly pulled a muscle. But again, I didn't respond. Not directly. I let it marinate. Let her paranoia fester like mold under a leaky sink. It was a test. I wanted to see how far she'd go to salvage her pride, and how much rope she'd give me to hang her with. Turns out, it was a lot of rope. The next escalation came in the form of a formal complaint to the HOA accusing me of violating Clause 14b, improper use of shared utility infrastructure. She tried to force a vote that would require all tech installations be subject to inspection and approval by the board. She even claimed that network waves from my house were interfering with her pacemaker. She doesn't have a pacemaker. But logic doesn't live on her street anymore. The meeting was a disaster for her. I showed up early, as always, in my usual calm blue shirt and a USB drive full of packet logs, legal documents, and the ISP's official incident report. The ISP, bless their corporate heart, had even drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to her, which I read aloud. The room fell so silent you could hear the HOA secretary's fake pearls rattle. Karen tried to object. She claimed I forged the documents, that the ISP was colluding with me, that I was weaponizing bandwidth. I raised a hand slowly and said, "So, just to confirm, Karen, you're accusing an internet service provider, city inspector, and 3 board-certified engineers of conspiring to mess with your TikTok?" The room broke into stifled laughter. Even the treasurer, Mr. Palmieri, who once fined me for a slightly off-white fence post, choked on his coffee. Karen stormed out before the vote. The motion failed. Her clause died. And I could have ended it there. Could have just let her spiral into the obscurity of HOA grudges and awkward gardening club meetings. But no. She crossed the line when she tried to interfere with my home again. 3 nights later, I heard a soft, mechanical "we're outside" at 2 a.m. My motion sensors picked it up. I checked the feed. There it was. Karen's boyfriend crawling through the shared shrub line with a pair of bolt cutters and a Home Depot flashlight clipped to his hoodie. He was trying to get to my network junction again, maybe to undo the damage, or maybe just to vandalize it out of spite. I called the cops. Quietly. Calmly. And I didn't stop him. I let him get close. Let him cut the zip ties on the panel. Let him unspool the line. That's when the officer stepped out from behind the recycling bin and asked him politely to put the tools down. Busted. Caught mid-sabotage. Karen showed up to the scene in a bathrobe screaming entrapment like she was in a bad courtroom drama. Her boyfriend claimed he was fixing a landscaping light. Unfortunately for him, the officer had already watched the footage from my security cam, the one I had posted to a private cloud server the moment motion was detected. The same one that caught him on video trying to jam a screwdriver into my fiber hub. He wasn't arrested, just cited. But the report made it to the City Council's Code Enforcement Division. And from there, the whole neighborhood got a taste of the blowback. Because Karen's HOA wasn't just petty, it was also dirty. And she'd just kicked open the door for inspection. See, I'd done a little digging myself. Not the illegal kind, just a careful review of public filings. Turns out, the HOA had used discretionary funds to pay for neighborhood tech upgrades 2 years ago. The line item totaled over $12,000. But when I checked the vendor name, it led to a non-existent company registered to a P.O. box in the same town as Karen's cousin. I quietly forwarded the file to the city's compliance officer. And then I waited. When the audit came, it was swift, sudden, delicious. HOA records were subpoenaed. Emails reviewed. Karen's smug little HOA throne started crumbling from the inside out. She tried to play it off like it was all just confusion, a miscommunication with a vendor. But the documents told a different story. Funds redirected. Fake invoices. Signatures that didn't match. And worst of all, emails where she bragged about getting hookups from family members on contractor deals. Residents were furious, especially once they learned that their HOA dues had paid for a communal tech installation that never actually got installed. Meanwhile, Karen had upgraded her smart TV, installed 2 new mesh routers, and gotten a security doorbell that looked suspiciously like the one listed on the invoice. The HOA board voted to suspend her pending investigation. Karen, being Karen, refused to step down. claimed it was all retaliation for her whistleblower efforts. She even accused me of hacking her emails and forging the vendor document. I didn't respond to that either. I didn't need to. The audit firm was independent, city-approved, and brutally thorough. I just watched it unfold from the sidelines like a sports commentator who already knew the final score. But there was one final twist still cooking. While Karen was busy spiraling and blaming everyone from me to Mark Zuckerberg for her problems, I was setting up the perfect finale. A presentation. At the next Open HOA forum. Topic: How to protect your household network from unauthorized access. I advertised it in the community newsletter. Added that the session would include live demonstrations of bandwidth throttling, digital footprints, and common router security mistakes. Karen, of course, showed up. She thought it was a trap. It wasn't. Well, only a little. The presentation went smoothly. Clean. Educational. I even brought props. A fake router with blinking lights, a flowchart of how packet loss worked, and some hilarious screenshots of botched connection names. Karen_public VPN got a laugh from the crowd. Then came the Q&A. Karen raised her hand. How do you know when someone's stealing your internet? She asked, voice full of faux innocence. I smiled. Well, I said, pulling up a chart. You monitor for sudden spikes in usage. Unusual MAC addresses. Unexpected devices showing up on your router log. I clicked the slide. Or, if you're really lucky, they try to do it twice. On video. The next slide played a short snippet of her boyfriend with the bolt cutters. The crowd gasped. Karen's face collapsed like a poorly made soufflé. She stood up, knocking over her chair, and barked something about legal action. I didn't even need to reply. The HOA president spoke up from the front row. Karen, I think it's time for you to go. And she did. Red-faced. Muttering. Drowning in the same slow-loading bitterness she once served to everyone else. Her internet privileges were revoked, her HOA seat suspended, and her digital reign of terror officially throttled. After the presentation, the neighborhood treated me like some sort of folk hero. People I barely knew stopped me while walking my dog, asking questions about routers, firewalls, or whether they too might be secretly being throttled by Karen. The HOA newsletter even printed a photo of me pointing at my bandwidth flowchart like I was the neighborhood's own cybersecurity messiah. All of this would have been funny if it weren't for the storm brewing quietly behind the scenes. Because Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. When you strip power away from someone who builds their entire identity around control, they don't disappear. They regroup. They obsess. They plot. That's what Karen did. The problem was, she'd already burned her bridge with the ISP, the HOA board, and most of the neighbors, so she needed a new angle. And I underestimated just how far she'd go to find one. It started subtly, too subtly for most people to notice. The HOA board email system started glitching. Logins failed. Password resets bounced. Archived documents vanished. At first, people blamed the switch to a new online portal. But I knew better. I dug into the system logs from my backup account. I had volunteered once for an IT cleanup project 2 years prior, which conveniently gave me admin access I'd never relinquished. The logs showed a series of login attempts from one external IP. Over 900 attempts in 72 hours. It was a brute force attack. Now, most Karens don't have that kind of technical skill. But Karen had one asset. Her vape goblin boyfriend, Greg. Turns out Greg had a checkered online past, complete with a Reddit history full of white hat hacker threads and a few shady forums discussing router spoofing. He wasn't brilliant, but he was just smart enough to be dangerous. And now he was trying to crack into the HOA system. Probably to erase emails, plant fake documents, or, most likely, frame me. I considered reporting it to the police again. But Karen had learned to cover her tracks, barely. The IP traces were routed through a proxy server, and I couldn't prove direct involvement. Not yet. So instead of fighting the fire, I built a bigger flame. I created a decoy server. It looked exactly like the HOA board's backend site. Same layout, same login page, same admin panel. But it wasn't real. It was a honeypot, designed to lure in bad actors, log their keystrokes, IPs, and device fingerprints, and document everything. Then I sat back, gave it a day, and watched the magic happen. It took 9 hours before Greg, or someone pretending not to be Greg, landed on the fake page and started punching in credentials. Then came the code injections, the SQL test, the credential stuffing attempts, all recorded, all timestamped, all linked to a proxy IP that traced right back to a VPN used by a certain neighbor 2 doors down. But here's where it got delicious. I programmed the honeypot to simulate success. It gave the attacker fake access to confidential HOA files, fabricated emails, budget spreadsheets, internal gossip. It was digital catnip. I even named one file suspension_evidence_against_Karen.pdf. That one got downloaded 3 times. Hook, line, sinker. I let them dig around for 2 more days, collecting a mountain of forensic data, device ID, browser fingerprint, timestamps, file paths. Then I compiled it all and submitted it quietly to the city's cybercrime task force, along with a brief. Ongoing cyber intrusion originating from local HOA residents, likely tied to prior utility sabotage case. I included video evidence, IP logs, and a full playback of the attacker accessing the honeypot. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. Karen disappeared from public view. No rants, no meetings, no flyers. I assumed they'd backed off, spooked by the silence. Maybe they knew they were being watched. Maybe they were finally afraid of consequences. Then one afternoon, my internet dropped. Just like that. Dead. No warning. No blinking lights. No outage reports from the ISP. No scheduled maintenance. My whole house went dark. Even my backup LTE router wouldn't connect. I tried every diagnostic in the book. Nothing. I checked the main line out front intact. Then I remembered the utility box at the end of the cul-de-sac. I sprinted down the sidewalk in flip-flops, already knowing what I'd find. The panel was open. The fiber node had been cut cleanly. Not yanked or damaged accidentally. Cut with precision. The same way someone might clip a wire if they were trying to shut up the only person still making noise. I had cameras there, too. Hidden in the street lamp. The footage showed Greg, at 4:17 a.m., wearing gloves, hoodie, and carrying a pair of wire snip. It was short, clean, surgical. One snip, one zip of the panel, one slow walk back across the street to Karen's side door. What they didn't know was that I had a redundant system. A third internet line, a business-class link I had installed through my own LLC months prior, routed underground from the opposite end of the neighborhood. It kicked in 10 minutes later. Within an hour, I had downloaded the footage, written the report, and uploaded everything to the city task force portal again. But I wasn't just submitting it this time. I was escalating. I sent a copy of the video to our local news tip line. I called the HOA president and asked him to meet in person. And then I filed a formal civil complaint for property destruction and cyber interference, naming Karen and Greg as primary suspects. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the next day. By now, the audit had turned up enough dirt that Karen was officially suspended. But the board still hadn't removed her. That changed the moment I showed the footage on a projector. Every resident who attended saw it. Greg, hunched at the panel, his face clearly caught in the glow of the street lamp cam as he walked back home. Karen, opening the door for him. And right there in front of half the neighborhood, the board voted. Not just to remove Karen permanently, but to file their own lawsuit against her for misuse of HOA funds and violation of municipal infrastructure laws. Karen tried to storm out. Again. But this time, she didn't get far. A uniformed city officer, there to observe the meeting under an open investigation request, asked her politely to stay. She sat down with the body language of a coiled cat that had just realized the dog was bigger than it remembered. "Greg?" He didn't show up. Rumor was, he'd fled to his cousin's house upstate, probably Googling how extradition works. That evening, I got a call from the local station. They wanted to run the story. I declined to go on air, but I gave them permission to use the footage. They blurred faces, but everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who the local HOA scandal was about. The next day, Karen's house had a for sale sign. No announcement. No goodbye. Just a poorly photoshopped listing on Zillow that claimed the property was in a quiet, tech-savvy neighborhood. The irony almost made me forgive her. Almost. As for me, I upgraded my network again. Quad redundancy, biometric locks on the utility box, solar backups for the router systems. I didn't need it, but I wanted it. Because when people ask me now why I'm so paranoid about my internet, I just smile and say, let's just say I've been buffered once. Never again. You'd think the fallout from a full-blown HOA cybercrime scandal would be the end of it. Most people would cut their losses and move. Start fresh. Maybe even, I don't know, reflect. Not Karen. She was like a computer virus that wouldn't uninstall, hiding in the system, waiting for the next vulnerability to exploit. After her house went up for sale, she vanished from public life, but little echoes of her still popped up, like malware signatures buried in old code. I started getting weird mail. Unmarked envelopes with fake return addresses. One contained an outdated pamphlet on internet safety, covered in greasy fingerprints. Another had a single printed page of the HOA bylaws, highlighting the clause on shared resource courtesy. My name was scribbled in red Sharpie at the top. Then came the delivery errors. Pizza I didn't order, a moving truck that arrived at my address claiming I'd requested a quote. All harmless pranks, just annoying enough to get under the skin. But all too obviously Karen. The mistake she made was thinking I was still playing defense. I wasn't. While she was busy playing budget joker, I had started rebuilding the HOA infrastructure from the ground up. With her gone and her influence obliterated, the board had voted to modernize the entire system. Guess who they put in charge of the upgrade? Yours truly. They gave me full authority to rebuild the digital backbone of the HOA, website, email servers, security protocols, member portals. Everything. I even convinced them to switch to a blockchain-based voting system, which meant every motion passed had a digital signature, visible to all residents. I created the HOA's first-ever transparency dashboard, accessible via login, which publicly displayed every fine issued, every expenditure, every board vote. That alone cut neighborhood drama in half. No more mystery fines for grass height. No more secret landscaping project. Every decision was now on record, time-stamped and reviewable. It was HOA 2.0, and it was beautiful. And yet, in the middle of all this digital progress, Karen still haunted the shadows. One afternoon, I was walking back from the mailbox when a black SUV rolled past slowly. Tinted windows, barely creeping down the street. I recognized the license plate. It was her son's car, the one she swore she didn't speak to anymore after their falling out over a borrowed lawnmower. He didn't stop, didn't wave. Just glided past like he was scanning for signs of life. I waved anyway. I wanted her to know I saw. The very next morning, the HOA site went down. At first, I thought it was a server update glitch. But I had failsafe, auto backups, load balancers. The system shouldn't have crashed, unless someone had used a very specific admin override command. A command only 3 people had access to. I checked the logs. One of the credentials had been spoofed. At first glance, it looked like mine. But the session was from a device I'd never used, an old MacBook Pro still running Mojave. The session lasted 9 minutes. Just long enough to trigger a manual purge of the public dashboard and redirect the DNS to a completely blank page. It wasn't just an attack, it was a message. Luckily, my disaster recovery protocol kicked in within the hour. The entire system restored itself from a secured backup, but I'd seen enough. I called in a favor from an old college friend who now worked cybersecurity for a state agency. I shared the access logs, the device fingerprint, and the previous incident report. Within 24 hours, he got back to me. "Guess what your attacker used to spoof your admin login," he said. "A thumb drive. With a brute force emulator and a bootable bypass key." "Home built?" I asked. "Sloppy," he replied. "And guess what? That same thumb drive tried to access a city tax record server last month. Failed. But it's being investigated." I didn't even need to ask who the tax record belonged to. The local gossip circle had already whispered that Karen was trying to sue the city for harassment via infrastructure. Apparently, she believed her civil rights were violated by having her fiber removed, her HOA position revoked, and her house devalued by digital manipulation. I'd never heard that phrase before. Digital manipulation. It sounded like a rejected Tom Clancy novel. But Karen was dead serious. I found out she'd filed an actual small claims suit against the city, the HOA, and, naturally, me. She claimed I'd hacked her utilities, forged audit reports, and emotionally sabotaged her network access. It was so ridiculous that the judge dismissed most of it on site. But the case against me was still pending. Why? Because she had submitted evidence in the form of screenshots, doctored screenshots, of emails I'd supposedly written to the ISP ordering the removal of her internet service. Photoshop. Obvious. Stupid. But enough to force a court hearing. I wasn't worried about losing. I was worried about what she was willing to destroy just to win. Because Karen wasn't playing to win anymore. She was playing to scorch earth. So I did something drastic. I pulled up a program I hadn't used in years. One I built in college, back when I was still deep in hacker forums and cybersecurity contests. It was a silent tracker, designed to activate the moment someone opened a file. I renamed it HOA_refund_form 2023.pdf and left it on a cloud drive linked to an account I knew she was still lurking in, an old community chat group from the HOA days. I posted the file with a message, "Can't believe we're eligible for this. Wild." She downloaded it. Within 2 hours, her system pinged me from a hotel Wi-Fi network 3 towns over. She was still using Greg's old laptop. Still sloppy. Still arrogant. The tracker gave me everything I needed, a full view of her local machine's environment. I didn't access anything. Just noted the folder names, the open apps, the connected peripherals. Among them, a folder named Board Evidence Alt. Inside were image files with names like email_proof1_edit.png and isp_forge_script.txt. It was done. I contacted my lawyer and forwarded the metadata to the court with a signed affidavit. Within 48 hours, her suit was tossed. The judge wrote a scathing note in the dismissal, warning Karen that future filings of that nature could result in sanctions for court abuse. That was the moment she finally broke. A neighbor told me she saw Karen in her garage the next morning, crying while stuffing office supplies into trash bags. By noon, a U-Haul pulled up. No goodbye party. No final rant. Just a defeated, hunched figure loading tubs of paper, a dusty printer, and a collection of flamingo lawn ornaments. But I still wasn't satisfied. Because revenge isn't about gloating. It's about resolution. So I did one last thing. I walked over to her now empty house, stood at the property line, and logged into my network. I renamed my Wi-Fi to Karen Stole My Speed. Then I changed the guest network to Still Buffering. I made sure the signal was just strong enough to reach her driveway. Just strong enough to taunt anyone who ever tried to connect while driving past. Petty? Absolutely. But sometimes, justice comes in the form of a lag spike that never ends. The neighborhood was quieter after Karen left. Like someone finally muted the loudest, most chaotic radio station on a drive through hell. No more late-night HOA emergency emails. No more handwritten fines taped to recycling bins. No more entitled shrieking about invisible wires tampering with her aura. For the first time in years, I could sit on my porch with my coffee and not feel like I was being watched from behind a set of fake rose bushes. Still, the aftermath was messy. Karen hadn't just torched her own life, she'd left smoldering embers in every corner of the HOA. The audit firm uncovered even more buried skeletons: phantom invoices, double-billed landscaping work, duplicate camera system purchases that somehow only covered the same one intersection, her driveway. We discovered she'd even routed a portion of HOA discretionary funds to pay for her son's consulting services, which turned out to be Greg setting up a $29.99 mesh router and printing her HOA newsletters on pink paper. The board took weeks to clean it all up, but with Karen gone and my systems in place, things started to run smoothly. We passed a reform motion that limited executive power, enforced quarterly reviews, and, best of all, made every board vote public. The residents actually started showing up to meetings, not just to complain about grass length, but to contribute real ideas. We finally replaced the cracked pool tiles Karen had ignored for 3 summers straight. A retired couple volunteered to repaint the benches around the community center. The place felt functional, collaborative, human. But I didn't fully relax until 2 months later, when I received a call from a blocked number. It was Greg. At first, I didn't say anything. Just let the silence fill the line like dead air in a courtroom. "I know what you did," he said finally. "You set us up. That whole PDF? That was bait." I smiled to myself. "You figured that out all by yourself, or did Karen write a script for you to read?" There was a long pause. He sighed. "She's gone, man. She's living in her cousin's basement in Atlanta. No car. No Wi-Fi. Has to walk half a mile to check her email at the library. And I just wanted to say you won." I leaned back in my chair, watching the soft flicker of the LED on my router blink like a heartbeat. "It was never about winning," I said. "It was about ending it." Greg muttered something under his breath and hung up. That should have been the end of it. A neat bow tied around a year-long saga of digital warfare, passive-aggressive lawn disputes, and bandwidth revenge. But life's funny like that. The real ending didn't come from Greg. It came from something far pettier, something absurd, something perfectly Karen. 3 weeks after the call, I got a package on my doorstep. No return address, no markings, just a small, neatly taped box. I scanned it for devices, opened it slowly, half expecting a glitter bomb. Inside was a single object, a Wi-Fi extender. The same brand I'd seen in her network scan months ago. Attached was a note. It read, "Since you love strong signals so much." I laughed. Actually laughed. Out loud. Alone. It was the most anticlimactic act of attempted revenge I'd ever seen. I put the extender on my shelf and named it Karen's Legacy. It's still there, unplugged, like a little tech trophy of everything I'd been through. But that last move got me thinking. Karen might have been gone, but her type wasn't extinct. There'd always be another HOA dictator, another entitled neighbor, another digital saboteur with too much time and too little self-awareness. So I took the experience and turned it into something useful. I launched a blog. Bandwidth and Boundaries, Tales from the Suburban Trenches. It was half tutorial, half cautionary tale. I posted guides on protecting your home network, recognizing IP spoofing, setting up honeypots, and dealing with problematic HOAs. I even anonymized my story with Karen, splitting it into a serialized, neighborhood mystery thriller that gained a small cult following on tech forums. People loved it. Turns out, HOA drama and cybersecurity made for compelling reading. I got emails from other victims. Folks who had their utilities messed with, their Wi-Fi stolen, even one guy who swore his neighbor tunneled under a fence to tap into his Ethernet. And the best part? My blog caught the attention of a mid-tier digital magazine. They offered me a guest column. Nothing huge, just a monthly feature on residential tech issues. I called the first article, "When Karen Comes for Your Router." That article went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just a guy who got revenge on a petty neighbor. I was the internet revenge guy. My DMs were filled with requests for advice, stories of entitled people trying to hijack everything from air conditioners to solar panels. One guy said his neighbor stole his Ring doorbell footage to make a fake insurance claim. I offered suggestions, built them custom response plans. I even started getting paid to consult for neighborhoods looking to digitize their HOAs without falling into Karen-esque power spirals. It wasn't what I'd planned for my life, but it felt good. Not just sticking it to someone who tried to take advantage of me, but helping others do the same. Quietly, strategically, with precision. I became the exact opposite of Karen, a problem solver instead of a problem creator. But there was still one lingering thread. The property Karen left behind. It sat empty for a while. The bank repossessed it when she defaulted on her mortgage. Turns out, those forged invoices she submitted to the HOA weren't the only financial shortcuts she'd taken. After months of silence, the house went up for auction. I watched the listing quietly. No bids. Mold had started growing on the back siding. The flamingos were still in the yard, now bleached pale by the sun. Eventually, it sold. To me. I didn't buy it to move in. I bought it because I could. Because I wanted to walk through those halls and reclaim every square inch of bandwidth she ever stole. I converted the place into a co-working space for neighborhood freelancers and remote workers. Gutted the living room, installed a full fiber-optic mesh system, and called it the Signal House. Free coffee. Blazing fast internet. Karen's old office? Now a soundproof podcast studio. The first day we opened, someone asked about the name. I just smiled and said, "It's a long story." And as I sat in the sunlit lounge, sipping espresso from a mug that read "Buffer this," I thought back to the moment it all started, that flickering Netflix stream. The red light blinking in my closet. The packet logs. The flamingos. One dumb act of entitlement set off a chain of events that turned my life upside down and sideways, but I came out the other side better. Stronger. Wired tighter and smarter. Karen may have tried to steal my gigabit speed. But in the end, she gave me momentum. She gave me purpose. And most ironically of all, she gave me the best download speeds in town.